The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
Chatting personal finance with Warren Ingram. This week almost marks 2 years of the two-pot retirement system. There was a big worry that with the introduction of the system, South Africans would raid their savings pots for holidays, things they would like to get once and not so much needs, and really take away from their pensions. But we're going to be talking about the positives and some of the negatives that have come with the system. Warren Ingram, co-founder of Galileo Capital. Welcome again to the Money Show.
Thank you so much. Good to be on the show.
Hi, Warren.
Hi.
I think let's start here, Warren, in terms of this two-pot retirement system. It's been 2 years. Some of the trends that you've picked up, you worried about?
I think the big one that bothers me a lot is the people that drew in the first year are continuing. So one of the hopes was that if the government decides to divide up our retirement funds into money that's locked away for the very long term, and then another portion which is accessible, on a yearly basis, that people who are in financial trouble would use the savings pot, which is what they call the short-term money, that they would use that for kind of an emergency, and by definition, emergencies don't happen every year. They happen infrequently. And what we're seeing from the stats that are being published by retirement fund administrators is that about 2/3 of the people that withdrew in the first year have drawn again in the second year and are about to go into their third year. So what we're seeing is that actually very few people are new withdrawers. Only about 5% of the withdrawers are new. So the kind of the same group are withdrawing again and again. And maybe the second thing is the average. What are they drawing? What's the amount? And the amount isn't very large. It's kind of around that 9,000 to 10,000 rand level. And for some people, getting access to 9,000 rand in a year would be, a real emergency that's been resolved by getting that money. But I think if you're accessing it every year, it seems when members have been surveyed that they're using it to settle personal loans, overdrafts, credit cards, and some consumption stuff. In other words, just spending money. Very, very little of that money is being used to, for example, pay off a home loan or buy an asset that will generate income. It's being consumed. So it's not helping to build long-term growth. It's being used to solve a short-term problem.
Let's go back to the initial idea of why this was introduced, and perhaps a good idea in a country that doesn't have a great savings culture.
I was so happy when they implemented this. I think so. Just to understand the damage that was being done, when you've got a company retirement fund, in almost all instances nowadays, company retirement funds are called provident funds, and if you quit your job, you can before this system was changed, you could actually access your provident fund. Pay a huge amount of tax on it, but you could access the money in there. And so people who were in financial difficulty would often quit their jobs because they knew they had money in their retirement funds. They would then, cash in their retirement fund after they've quit their job, and usually pay away about a third of that in tax. So you cash in, you get 100,000 rand in your retirement fund, you pay away 33,000 rand, then you've got 66,000 left to settle the problem that you had, whatever that problem was. The thing that compounded this was that people were not always able, we're in a country with very high unemployment, so people weren't always able to then get another job. So now what happens is they've quit the one thing that was kind of keeping them afloat to access money in the short term, and then settling, a debt issue, but then actually having a much bigger debt issue, almost the very next month, because suddenly there's no income coming in.
Yeah.
And so this two-part system, the thing that was really useful there was that it allowed people who did have a big financial emergency to have some access to retirement funds, but also forcing a portion of the money to be invested for the long term for their retirement. And so, the problem with retirement savings is it's kind of asking people to do what's good for their future selves. And unfortunately, across the world, we don't always do what's good for us. That's why people smoke and drink too much and, eat the wrong foods and all those things. So somewhere along the line, sometimes we've got to create rules. And sometimes those rules are to protect us from ourselves. And this is one of those instances where government said, well, hang on, we need to help you look after yourself when you get to retirement. So some of your money is going to be locked away, but in exchange, you can access some of your money every single year. And so a brilliant initiative. It was meant to have been done a very long time ago. I think the unions were objecting tremendously. Maybe the one thing, if I get on my soapbox for a second, is what didn't come, which was supposed to be in the legislation, I think, was also that all employees would be forced to become members of retirement funds with this reform. Because at the moment, it's not law that if you work for an employer that you must contribute money to a retirement fund. And I think that would have been the kind of the next step to really make sure we start to look after ourselves into the future.
Which was much needed in a country that didn't have a lot of savers. But looking at those numbers and what people claimed they would do with the money, a lot of claimants before the system was introduced said they needed the money for paying debts and things like that. But it seems like South Africa's high cost of living also coming into play, with many of the claimants now spending the money on basic needs.
I think that's true. So the very sad part here is that, that money that you take out of your savings pot, if you're doing that every year, it's not tax-free or pain-free money. So what happens is when you draw from that, I'm just going to kind of use a very simple example. If you draw 10,000 Rand from your retirement fund, what actually happens is that SARS says, well, what are you earning in the whole year? So if you're earning 400,000 Rand and you're paying a tax rate of 31% on your earnings for that year, and then you draw 10,000 Rand from your savings, that 10,000 Rand gets added to your taxable salary for the year. So you pay away 31% of your 10,000 in tax. And so actually, you're getting out just under 7,000 Rand. So already you've lost there. That's money you just never get back. And then what happens after that is you lose the growth on that money for life. So if you have 10,000 Rand invested, over time, that will probably at a reasonable rate, will probably grow, over a 25-year career would be worth about 70,000 Rand in today's money. So the 10,000 you take out of your retirement fund and you've got 25 years to retirement, you could value that at 70,000 Rand. Now, imagine people do that 3 years in a row.
Sure.
That means they've lost 210,000 Rand in today's money, of their own retirement capital that would look after them when they get older.
And many South Africans will tell you they need that money. Another thing, though, when it comes to SARS is that if you do owe SARS money and you withdraw perhaps 9,000 Rand and you owe SARS 11,000 Rand, they're definitely going to swallow that money before it gets to you.
Yeah, and just to explain that again, so use that, I can't do good math, so let's keep the 10,000 as an example. So let's say you owe 11,000 Rand and you draw 10,000 out of your retirement fund. What happens now is you lose 31%, so you lose the 3,100 to normal tax. And then SARS says, oh, by the way, the tax that you owed us before of 11,000, you still owe us, so we're taking the 7 to pay off some of the tax debt that you owe. So then you've got a smaller tax debt is the result, but you incurred a new tax as well. So it's just a double whammy. And for a lot of people in that first year, when we were allowed to access our savings pots, that happened. People that entire amount just got swallowed up by tax debt.
Then looking at, the preservation rates when it comes to these sort of funds, they've definitely gone up. This is word from Old Mutual that went through about 35,000 claimants, saying the preservation rates have now risen by 33%, whereas cash withdrawals on exit fell from 61% to about 50%. So we're getting somewhere.
Yeah. So and that's so that's the thing is, in the very short term, there is going to be pain, to the whole system, because people are, maybe some people who would not have quit a job to access their retirement funds are now accessing some of their retirement fund. But what we are finding now is that when you change jobs, you're not going to be able to cash in your new money that you've been adding since September 24, and that's just going to accumulate and grow. So no matter what people want to do, even if they wanted to access that money before retirement, they can't. And so I understand the comment around but people would love to be able to access that money now because they've got a debt issue now, and fair point, but what we are guaranteeing, as a country now, is that a huge proportion of South Africans will get to the age of 55 or 60 or 65 with a decent retirement fund now. And every year that goes past, that savings pot will grow, that retirement fund pot will grow, which means more money to be invested in the JSE, more money goes into private companies that will create jobs and grow the economy. So I'm hoping that we actually start a virtuous circle with this big shift.
I think the number is 43 billion, or just over 43 billion, has been withdrawn from retirement fund savings in South Africa since the implementation of the two-pot retirement system in September of 2024. This includes nearly 4 million withdrawals. So the withdrawals are happening. People have paid debt when they needed to. They've gone back to withdraw for a second time to pay for things they need around the house. They've gone back for a third time, perhaps to cover other living expenses. But should we not be encouraging to say, look, if you want to withdraw 10,000 Rand, perhaps consider also adding 3,500 Rand to a tax-free savings account for that particular tax year?
I always, you're kind of asking the personal trainer.
Can't tell people what to do, but certainly could encourage.
No, agreed. But I'm saying it's like asking your personal trainer, should I go to gym in the morning when I don't feel like it? The personal trainer will say, of course you should. So of course we should add to our savings. The thing I don't like about that idea though is you're drawing money out of a retirement fund, you're paying away 30% or whatever your tax rate is, 25 or 30% in tax, and then hoping that, somewhere along the line, there'll be a gap to be able to then top up savings into the future. What I would much prefer is that, if you get the flexibility to be able to add to savings, maybe build up an emergency fund first. So go and create a money market account that's not in a retirement fund, it's not in a tax-free savings account. Put aside some money, so that you get to the point where maybe you get to 3 months worth of your expenses in your money market fund. And when the next emergency happens, you don't go and draw from your tax-free. Please don't do that. And you don't go and draw from your retirement fund. What you do is you go and draw it from your emergency fund. And so, that would be the kind of big long-term strategy that I think people should follow to try and protect themselves from future emergencies. But if you're in it today, what I wouldn't do is draw money out of my retirement fund and then say, well, a portion of that money I'm going to add to another savings account, because you've paid away so much tax that you're just setting yourself back 2 steps to then take 1 step forward. Rather only take half a step back if you have to.
57 billion was the payout for 2025. We've now come to almost the second year since the introduction of the two-pot retirement system in 2024. We're looking at the positives and perhaps some of the negatives that have come with the introduction of the system. One thing for sure, though, it's forcing a lot of South Africans to save their money. We'll continue this conversation after this.
The Money Show. Personal finance with Warren Ingram.
And if you've just joined us, we're talking the two-pot retirement system. This week marks 2 years since the system was introduced in September of 2024. The now outgoing SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter, of course, he's left that particular seat, saying last year that a total amount of tax collected around 15 billion rand for every withdrawal made. I think 4 million were made last year. But Warren, looking at the two-pot withdrawal system, some people have not withdrawn, and what would be the benefit of doing that in terms of sitting on your hands and just watching the money grow?
I think it's the thing that becomes kind of the holy grail of investing is how long can you let your money grow? And there was a bank that had an ad that said, "Let your money make money babies," and that's what you want here. You want your money to grow on itself, so that while you're sleeping, your money is growing. And retirement funds. The reason that retirement funds are so powerful in this instance is because all of the growth in a retirement fund is tax free. So if you've got 100,000 rand or in your retirement fund, or 10 million rand. All of the interest that it earns inside that fund, and all of the dividends, all of the capital growth, it grows without paying a cent of tax. And the longer you can defer tax on your growth investments, the more you benefit. So you only pay tax on your retirement funds when you draw money out, and that's really powerful, because something like a tax-free savings account, which is amazing, really like them. We're limited to putting in 46,000 rand a year.
Yeah.
But with retirement funds, we can put in a lot more. So it's a way for people to kind of do real wealth creation, where you can actually build up enough money to look after yourself over your lifetime, and potentially look after your kids, or give them a good start, to their adulthood as well. So you can build intergenerational wealth just with a retirement fund. I mean, it's an incredibly powerful thing.
I mean, if you've been disciplined enough to sit on your hands and not try and withdraw, I guess there would be no sense in doing it in the second year of the system, unless you absolutely need the money. But I guess the withdrawal system also still beats the high interest loans that we're seeing in the market. It's far better to borrow from yourself, if one could put it that way, than to go to someone who will charge 22% and north of that in terms of interest payments.
Yeah, that's maybe the keys. So someone, if someone said to me, like, is there ever a good time? I think it's worth thinking about very carefully. But when you're paying 22% or 25% interest that's compounding against you, when something's compounding against you at 25% a year, it's doubling every 3 years. So if you owe 100,000 rand on your credit card and you can't pay it off, in 3 years' time, it's 200,000. In that instance, I could understand that someone says, okay, I'm going to settle my card with my savings pot from my retirement funds, but I'm not going into that trouble again. I'm doing it to settle, and that's it. I'm never doing it again. Then for that, I think that's, for me, an emergency. But if you find yourself drawing money from your savings pot every year, and sometimes it's because I just need that holiday, I need whatever it is, the new phone, but you've got a perfectly good phone, then that's not a good reason to draw from your savings pot. It needs to be for real deep emergency.
Sanlam's latest benchmark study showing the awareness of the two-pot system has grown sharply. People are more aware of the system, from 59% in 2024 to 92% last year. Is it a system you think should last longer, and just how long should it be, at play for South Africans to catch up on their savings?
I think it's it's a brilliant initiative. So I hope it lasts far beyond my and your lifetime, and maybe future generations thereafter. I think it's a really good system. We should definitely not replace it. And it might not be popular in the short term, but as that whole retirement fund kind of pool of money grows, there will be a lot more money available in South Africa for investing everywhere. And maybe just the one comment there, and I mentioned at the early part of the show, is I just really think that government should look at forcing all employees to be parts of retirement funds, because that's the one thing so there's smaller companies, for example, where it's not obligatory to be part of a retirement fund, and then people opt out, and that's not good either.
We also have our listener question, a very interesting one this evening from Lindy. Says, hi, I'm 34 and my washing machine has just packed up. So I need to replace it and probably my fridge soon too. I have been offered an account with the shop to buy these things and pay a small monthly amount. And they also mentioned a 24-month plan. My mother says this is the wrong thing to do and that I should save up and pay cash. But that could take me months, Lindy says, and I need a washing machine now. So what to do, Warren Ingram?
I think it's like when you get married, Motheo, you should always listen to your wife. And Lindy, you should probably listen to your mom.
Mom knows
she knows
best.
What she's talking about. Mom knows best. So what happens is when the store gives you a payment plan, it's not like it's, if the washing machine's 10,000 Rand, it's not like you just get 10,000 Rands worth of washing machine that you afford to pay off over 24 months. You're paying off interest on that. And it's usually very high, very expensive interest. So suddenly, you've actually ended up paying, instead of paying 10 grand, you've paid 14 or 15 grand when you add the finance fees and the interest, etc. So I agree with your mom 100%. I would be, building up the cash and, kind of abuse the friends and family for a while to use their washing machines if you need to. I understand we all need to, get our clothes done. But I do think your mom's right. You want to build up cash to pay for appliances because there's no value to those appliances if you had to sell them, and you certainly don't want to be paying high rates of interest on something like that.
I was about to say I wouldn't imagine Lindy wants to hand wash her clothes, and I don't know, with the fridge also set to go, where would she put her stuff? I think for her, she's expressing an immediate need while the mom is saying, stop with the instant gratification and getting the latest appliances. Put the money away. Suffer a little bit so you can have a bit of your money back to yourself.
Exactly. And you and I have to rely on Lindy's mom, right? She probably knows her daughter rather well. So I do think that's good. It's good. It's really good advice, common sense advice. If the fridge hasn't packed up, then delay as long as you can, save as fast as you can, and then, try and buy the fridge and, maybe get a secondhand one. And the same thing with a washing machine. Can you find one, it's in good quality, that's secondhand, much cheaper than buying a new one if you need to.
Brilliant insights there from Warren Ingram, co-founder of Galileo Capital. And that's how we close it here with the personal finance feature on the Tuesday edition of The Money Show. Stay in the black.